following is brought to you by Spark. Welcome to Hope, Help, and Healing. This podcast is a space for real conversations about mental health, suicide, addiction, grief, and recovery. Some of the topics discussed in this podcast may be difficult or triggering. Please take care of yourself as you listen. You can pause at any time and return when you feel ready. If you or someone you know is struggling or in crisis, help is available right now. You can call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or visit 988lifeline.org. Support is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You are not alone. This podcast exists to remind you that hope is real, help is available, and healing is possible. Let's begin.
Welcome to our first podcast. My name is Dennis, and this is the Hope, Help, and Healing podcast. Michelle and I are part of the Spark Coalition. Michelle, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle, and this is just something that Dennis and I have been called to do, and we're really excited about what we can, hopefully we can bring some hope, help, and healing to some other people out there.
And our first episode is really just trying to help explain why we're even doing this and what we are trying to do. So let's first talk a little bit about the name. The name is tied to a conference that we put on last year. And we thought about when we think about what's going on in our communities that we serve, being Anderson and Cherokee County in the deep piney woods, there are a couple things that stand out. As you can tell by our background, we have very nice scenery. We have good things in our communities. We have things that people love to participate. They love to talk about. They love to celebrate. One thing they don't like to talk about are the things that we're going to talk about tonight. And that is the alarming rate of lives being lost to suicide and mental health. Our podcast is all about discussions around mental health, addiction, trauma, abuse, and suicide. Because unfortunately, for as great of all the things that we have in our community, we also have some things that we need to talk about. That is why this podcast exists, is to start these conversations. There are probably people out there that wouldn't think that these are things that we should be talking about. And certainly it's been our experience, Michelle, that, there are some people who don't want to talk about this. Um, have you seen that in some of the interactions that you've had with people in the community?
Yeah, actually, I was talking with somebody a couple earlier this week, and um, one of the things that she had said is that she felt like she needed to get some mental health assistance, but um, she was really afraid to come in and do that because of what other people might think about her. And so I kind of we talked about that, and told her, if you really think about it, every one of us struggles with something that has to do with mental health. This is not something that only certain people have, or if they want to call them crazy people have. Every single one of us suffer with mental health of some sort. And we need to make that a more common language that we just talk about, because each person is not just, oh, that person is having a mental health crisis. We all do at one point in our lives, some just a little bit harder than others because they don't have those coping skills or the ways of being able to connect to others.
Right. Now let's talk a little bit about why we know this and these, what how we kind of got to where we're at. So I'll start with myself. Um, I am a licensed professional counselor and a licensed chemical dependency counselor. Been doing it for quite some time. Have a master's degree in counseling, of course, and I also have a second master's in addictions counseling. Michelle and I are both very active in the communities that we serve, but for us, it's also personal experiences. Unfortunately, I've had clients who have suicided, and it happened early in my career, dealing with and coping with a client who suicided. It's not easy, and it is very difficult to accept because you want to blame yourself. You want to try to understand it. And unfortunately, this is something that a lot of people in our community deal with, but they don't have these kinds of platforms. They don't have perhaps people that are willing to hear them. So we really hope to break that stigma, but we also come at it with different experiences. Um, certainly Michelle and I have a passion for this, and we want to give people hope and help and provide an avenue for healing. But we all have personal experiences with this, and we all have different kind of walks of life that we come from. It's not easy to talk about. So maybe Michelle, we could talk a little bit about what makes it easy for us to talk about. So a lot of people struggle with suicide and just kind of talking about suicide. So what makes it, and maybe it's not easy. I don't know, Michelle. What makes you able to talk about suicide?
I think the first couple of times that I actually talked about it with another person, it was a little uncomfortable. Um, because I think the word suicide just is kind of one of those scary words that you don't want to hear or you don't want to talk about. Um, but I think that for me, it's important to be able to talk about it because I have my own story um, related to suicide. So, as a younger person, many, many years ago, I had some suicidal thoughts while I was in high school. And after high school, I actually had some suicide attempts. And so I understand what it feels like to be in that dark place and not really knowing what to do or who to talk to about that. And I think I wanted to be able to make a difference in other people's lives, especially with our young people now. Um, they're just they're just absorbing everything that they see on the internet and whatever is, in those, web things that they do, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all of that. They're just being bombarded with stuff, and they don't have the coping skills to be able to say, "Hey, I need some help. I'm really struggling here, and I don't know what to do." And so I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we do talk about that and be able to know that there's nothing wrong with talking about it and being able to have conversations so that people know they can reach out to somebody else and be able to get the help that they need, because a lot of times people think that they don't have anybody there or that nobody cares. And when in reality, there are a lot of people that are there and a lot of people that care. They just don't know what to look for and they don't know what's going on. So having those conversations allows us to have that ability to be able to start talking about it.
And it's really difficult to. I know when I was first getting into the field, it was one of those things that of course, I'd never asked someone that question, but I remember I was at a training a long time ago, and there's a gentleman who's been doing this for a long time named Dr. David Jobs, and David Jobs works with vets, and he's used to just kind of being straightforward. And he was doing this training. We were fortunate enough to have him come down to Texas, and he was doing this demonstration where a vet and he were having this interaction. So the vet in this scenario was suicidal, and Dr. Jobs just basically said, "Why haven't you done it yet?" Um, and everyone in the audience is just kind of like, "Wow," you know. But it really normalized that conversation, and I think that's what we really try to do with our work is normalize the conversation. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to have these thoughts because ultimately, as hard as it is to understand, especially if you've never had these kinds of thoughts, suicide is a logical solution to a temporary problem. And it feels like this is something that may be a good solution in that moment because we just want whatever's going on to end. Your brain will go there. Given the right situation, the right stressors, everyone is capable of having these kinds of thoughts. But it's really trying in a very difficult environment to help people have these conversations. So there's another part of this aspect of what we're trying to do, and that we want to teach people how to have these conversations. Now, Dr. Jobs was influential in that I could see someone who's done this for a long time just be very direct and, honest about it. So that helped me as a professional learn how to ask these questions. But we also want to, again, kind of the nature of why we're doing what we're doing. We want to teach people how to have conversations around suicide. I tell you, in our community, one of the most difficult challenges that Michelle and I face in our coalition are the attitudes. And I remember years ago, I was doing a workshop, and and these were all teachers. These are people who are teaching our kids, but also spend a considerable amount of time with our kids. And inevitably, I always ask the questions, no matter what I'm doing as a workshop or if I'm giving some kind of presentation. I usually ask, how many of you would have a problem with asking, are you suicidal? And naturally, someone said yes. And again, this is not uncommon. But the response is something still to this day. And all the workshops and presentations that I've done I've never had this happen before, in that they said it's none of my business and turned their back. And this was a 6.5 hour workshop. And for the rest of the session, the workshop, I should say, I stared at this person's back because they refused to engage with me and basically said, it's not my business. It's not my concern. And, I think, Michelle, you and I are dynamically opposed to that point of view, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that when we have people that don't care, or they think that's not any of my business, that's kind of where our society has gone to. It's, that's their business. I'm not going to get involved in that. And we both know that when you come together as a community and you care about your community and you care about the people that are in your community, having the compassion to want to know if somebody else is hurting is so important for any community to have, because you have to be able to care about other people in their darkest moments, and that's really important in the lives of somebody that is suicidal, that do have thoughts of hurting themselves. They honestly think that there is nobody that cares about them. And if they come across a person as the one that Dennis described, that is just one more thing that just says, yep, that was my sign. Nobody cares.
Right.
And that's when it usually happens, because they feel like nobody cares about them and that they would be better off not being here anymore.
Right. And we know so many instances where that scenario that Michelle lined out has actually played out in reality. And, you get to a spot with suicide where you don't think anyone cares. And um, Michelle, do you remember feeling like that in some of those dark moments in your life where no one cared whether you were alive or not? Do you remember kind of what those thoughts look like for you?
I do. I remember the very first time that I had thoughts of suiciding, and um, it was really late at night. It was probably 1 o'clock in the morning. Nobody was awake. I think I was about 18 years old, and I just kept thinking, everybody would be better without me there, that I was causing everybody to really stress out. Um, I wasn't doing anything, I wasn't offering anything to anybody, and I had been emotionally abused by my boyfriend, telling me that I was worthless and that nobody would love me. And so all of those things, even though I had very loving parents that cared about me, I still felt like I was being a burden to them, and that it would be better for them if I wasn't there anymore. And that was when I decided I was going to overdose. And when I did, I was there for about, I had written all my letters and I had talked, I had planned it out. And it was about 30 or 45 minutes later when all of a sudden I said, I, I don't want to do this. I don't want to die. I want to be here. So I went and told my parents. And then they rushed me to the ER, and all the stuff happened after that. And then I was admitted into the hospital, and um I still remember the pain in my parents' faces, um, because they really had no idea that I felt the way that I did. Um, they didn't know to ask me, and I didn't feel safe enough to tell them, because they were always working so hard. And they worked like 16 hours a day. And so we were kind of off on our own, and we were just kind of doing our own thing, me and my siblings. But I just remember how upset they were and how devastated, that I had felt the way that I did, and they didn't recognize that.
And of course, you would imagine, and I would imagine too, not only did they not know to ask the questions, but probably didn't recognize the signs because, you were a teenager, and it's really hard sometimes to spot teenage moodiness and teenage depression. So
Exactly.
probably was, even if they had maybe known to ask, sometimes it's very hard to distinguish, especially at that age, right? So
Hmm.
this is one of the reasons why we exist, is to help people understand that. As a matter of fact, that workshop that I referenced a moment ago, this is what I was teaching these teachers, is how to recognize the signs of distress and mental illness in young people. Because sometimes you dismiss it as, well, that's just them being a boy or them being a girl or something like that. But the more people understand what this looks like, the safer our communities can be. And, Michelle's story is not unique in that she had loving parents. She had parents that were working 16, 17 hours a day to make sure her and her siblings had, a roof over their head and clothes on their body, and just provide for them. Another example of this, and Michelle and I use this example because this person is very well known in the realm we exist in, and in suicide prevention. It really speaks to, and when we talk about this, we talk about how this is a reflection of the community we live in, because whether we want to face it or not, these lives lost are preventable, and they reflect on our community. So the gentleman's name, in case anyone has never heard of this gentleman, is Kevin Hines, and he's famous just because since his struggles, and he still has struggles today. This is not someone who's just kind of defeated their illness, but when he was really struggling around Michelle's age, ironically, he had decided that he was going to suicide. He had a little bit of a different situation, Michelle, in that, he was developed or had developed some psychosis. So his voices were really loud in his head. And same thing, same messaging. You're a burden. No one cares about you. And just like Michelle, he had very loving adoptive parents who had provided him just a remarkable life given his start in life. And on the day of his attempt, he came downstairs, and his dad, to his credit, recognized there was something off about Kevin that day and invited him to talk about it, eat dinner, let's do something later. And Kevin, of course, said yes. But part of Kevin's talk, if you ever want to hear his story, I encourage you to look it up on YouTube or one of his TED Talks. He usually references, had my dad known to ask me if I was suicidal, had my dad known to ask those questions, it could have happened differently. But as it was, he didn't know. So as he goes to take the trolley to take him to the Golden Gate Bridge, because he'd actually done some research to find out the best way, if you will, to suicide. And this is well before the day of Google and Yahoo. This was during the archaic days of the internet, so you had chat rooms. And he got into one of these chat rooms, and someone found out he lived in California and near the Golden Gate Bridge, and told him, hey, the Golden Gate Bridge is where a lot of people go, and actually told him good luck. And the message actually was good luck. So if you can imagine, you're already battling these voices in your head telling you you're no good, you're a burden, you should die. And someone tells you good luck, they're not helping. On that trolley, Kevin sits in the back of the trolley, crying, weeping, emotional, because he's on his way to his death, he thinks. No one on that trolley says anything because presumably it was none of their business what this young kid is going through. Even the driver who had observed this behavior, however long that journey was, at the last stop, Kevin was the last passenger. He says, the end of the road, kid. Gets off, walks past. Kevin walks past him. He never says anything. All these different points where someone could have said something to Kevin, they didn't. On the Golden Gate Bridge itself, there are people walking, there are tourists, there are bicyclists. There are people walking by, driving by, riding by Kevin, and not saying anything to Kevin. Kevin is pacing nervously, trying to muster the strength, the courage, if you will, to make this jump. And finally, someone comes up to Kevin. And Kevin must have been thinking, finally, someone's noticing me. And the person comes up to them, and Kevin, probably feeling a little bit of relief that someone's finally noticed them, walks up and says, can you take my picture? So Kevin, not quite what he expected, gladly took the person's picture, handed the camera back. That was it. The one human interaction outside of his father that day, didn't say anything. Kevin was noticeably distressed, and that was it. The voices were right. No one does care. With that, he plummets, and the jump into the bay from that height is like jumping into concrete. Most people drown. Some people die instantly. But with Kevin, the fortunate thing is Kevin was young. He was in shape. But it did break him in many different ways. Physically, it broke him from about midsection down. Kevin had very limited use of his legs at this point. A couple things, fortunately, happened for Kevin. And I think for Michelle and I, our point of view, these are miracles that happened for Kevin. Miracle number one, and this is not typical for jumpers or persons trying to suicide on the Golden Gate Bridge, but that day, miracle number one is that a Coast Guard cutter happened to see Kevin jump from the bridge. And unknowing to Kevin at the time, they were already on their way to come get him. Miracle to number two took place. He really didn't realize what this was, but the miracle took place in that as Kevin was struggling to keep his head above water, as he was crying out to God, saying, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. Something kept on hitting Kevin. And unknowingly, as it hit Kevin, it actually lifted him above the water a little bit. Now, Kevin cannot see and Kevin does not know. And what he thought was that there was some kind of shark, perhaps, or something that was aggressively trying to get Kevin. So now, not only has he jumped, now not only is he broken, he can feel the pain in his body. He's barely treading water. Now something is going to eat him. The Coast Guard cutter gets there, pulls Kevin's broken body from the water, and gets him to the ER, where the third miracle happens, in that a world-renowned surgeon who was touring hospitals in the Bay Area was there. And the miracle is that this surgeon was actually supposed to be flying out that morning, but for whatever reason, he chose to stay one more day. And he was actually in the ER as EMS brought Kevin's broken body. And this surgeon's specialty was treating these kinds of injuries, catastrophic skeletal injuries. So Kevin received the best care possible. He received the quickest response possible. And years later, the final piece of this for Kevin, and you'll notice this, he's put out several documentaries, and every now and then you're going to see a reference to this, what I'm about to share with you. But he was on a podcast. He was on a talk show, actually, not a podcast, but he was on a talk show, and he was telling his story to help people. And that's what Kevin is known for, is really being a strong advocate for suicide prevention. But he was telling his story, and the guy calls in and says, "Oh my God, Kevin, I'm so happy you're alive. I was on the bridge the day you jumped, and I didn't know what happened to you. I thought you had died. I'm so happy to hear you on the radio, but I got to correct you. You were talking about the sharks who almost got you. Those weren't sharks, man. Those were sea lions." Unknowingly, a group of sea lions, unknowing to Kevin, but a group of sea lions kept on hitting Kevin. And every time they hit Kevin, it kept him from drowning. Truly, truly miraculous events in Kevin's life that day that saved him and set him on a path to do advocacy around the world. Now, I want to wrap this particular story up with community, with this last part of at least part of Kevin's story, because he's still writing his story, thankfully. This happened in the early 2000s. Kevin was part of a movement of survivors of those who have lost people to suicide on the Golden Gate Bridge. And every year, these families who had lost someone would petition the city to put up safety netting on the Golden Gate Bridge as a way of deterring suicide attempts, so that even if someone jumped, they wouldn't die. They would hit the net, be safe in the net. You could rescue them from the net, but they would not die. Years and years and years and years, people from the community would come to these, including Kevin, and they would come holding portraits of their family members who died. And for years, they would not do anything. Some years it was money. Some years there was the legal requirements. But what it boiled down to in the end is they did not want to ruin the aesthetic of the Golden Gate Bridge. That's what it was in the end. They chose a structure over human life. We share this kind of story when we do presentations, and we share it here with you today, because this is not the community that we need. We need a community that's just going to ask, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" And, being a good champion of this effort, I will tell you that I have witnessed Michelle do this on multiple times. Just put herself out there and ask people, "Are you okay?" I've seen you do it a bunch. So,
Yeah, I know. It's just one of those things that I just see it. I see somebody and they just seem so down, and I don't know, I just feel like I have to go over there and just say something just to let them know, you know, I'm here. if you need me.
But I have a feeling that
Yeah.
you were doing that before you got into the career you're in now. I have a feeling that's just kind of who you are.
It is something, I'm one of those empathetic people that I just kind of feel emotions around me, and I get drawn to them, and it just kind of happens. I don't know how it happens, but it does.
Right.
But it's just something that I don't know, I just do it. I don't even think about it. I just react.
So, for you, Michelle, it comes very naturally, but that's not everyone's personality. Even for myself, that is not a natural gift that I have. But I have been through enough in my professional my professional career, and just being able to teach all the workshops and being a student in these workshops as well, to understand that people do not want to die. They don't. They want someone to listen to them. They want sometimes they just want the pain to go away. Sometimes they don't really know what they want, but they do want the pain to stop, right? When you think about, kind of again, going back and looking at your own experiences with this, would you agree that that's, more than anything, you're just like, I just want the pain to stop?
Yes, I felt like I was in this darkness, and I just wanted the darkness to go away, and I didn't know that there was any other way. There just nothing seemed to have been working, and I was just so lost and sad, and um I'd pretty much alienated myself, um and so I'd kind of pushed everybody else away, and then when I got to the hole that I was in, it was really hard to get back out because everybody had walked away. Um, so reaching out to my parents, and getting their support. And then when the rumors started going around that, hey, Michelle was at a psych hospital, um, then some really true friends started coming back into my life, um, which was very helpful. I have a very close relationship with my sister. And so I just have a really good core group of friends that I've had over a lifetime. And and I know that when I start to feel any sort of way, I can call my friend who I've known since I was 5 years old and just say, you know what, I'm really struggling right now. And she's there every single time. Um, and we don't even live in the same state anymore. But she's there for me every time. And when she's struggling, I'm there for her. And I just think that it's really important for people to know that there are good people out there, and there are people that really do want to help. And that's something that I try to impress on everybody is I don't need to know you to want to help you. Um, I will help anybody that I see that needs help. Um, some others might have a harder time with that, but there are people out there that are like me that will help no matter what. Um, and we listen, and we care, and we want to make sure that you're going to be okay, and just letting them know that there is somebody out there that cares about you, um, is so important. And I know that with the use of 988, those people that are on that line, they generally care about each person that is calling in too. So I think, um, I've had several people that I've referred to the 988 crisis hotline, and every single one of them said that person was just so nice. They really listened to me, and they said I could call back anytime I needed to, and that I didn't have to be suicidal. If I just needed somebody to talk to, they would be there for me. And so that line is been something that has saved quite a few people, and it's really important that people use it and feel safe using that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about the work of our coalition, obviously 988 like Michelle's mentioned, has been a vital component of that, simply because not only our experience, but just what research shows us, people isolate themselves when they start thinking about suicide. And, Michelle's story, Kevin's story, and so many other stories around suicide involve people who have self isolated, put themselves kind of away from their support systems. Imagine a community where people know to reach out to 988. Imagine a community where parishioners, congregants, just people you walk through or walk by, I should say, they would say, "Are you okay?" They know what to do. They know how to handle these situations. And this really is not only part of our mission and our vision for where we want to see our community, is people helping people, which is at the heart. I think all of us are motivated to help people. Obviously, Michelle and I are in a profession where that's what we do, but everyone can be somebody. I tell people all the time, because there's such a stigma around suicide and even mental health, find someone that you can talk to. You don't have to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about killing myself." Sometimes you just need that distraction. You just need that voice that is friendly and accepting of you, to listen to you, to get through that very tough moment. Support from people who you know and trust is much more meaningful than anything else when dealing with mental health or even thoughts of suicide. We believe, collectively and individually, that, and I've mentioned this before, that this is preventable. Now, many people are going to argue with that. Many people are going to come up with, certain situations and say, "Well, what about this situation?" Michelle, let me ask you. I know I say this all the time. Do you believe suicide is preventable? And if so, how? How can we prevent suicide?
I do think that it is preventable, and there are many ways that we can do that. Number one, by just showing that you care about other people. Um, and then just, being with them, not letting them be by themselves. Don't let them isolate. But there are also ways of keeping those lethal means away from another person, um, until that period of time has gone away. We do trainings for that, and it's called calm. And it's basically you're learning how to be able to create an environment that is um, safe for the individual during that time period that they're struggling with. um and it's simple things like just having somebody hold their guns maybe for them, um taking the gun apart or putting the gun in one area and the ammunition somebody else is holding it. There's so many things that we can do to create an environment that allows the individuals to be safe without the lethal means, because we know that once you have access to lethal means, there's no turning back. So making their area safe is really important, and knowing how to do that and having the conversations with another individual on how to do that is really important, because we know here we're in East Texas, everybody has a gun, and it's just a part of our society here. So how do we create a safe environment for our people here, um, when they are struggling with their mental health? And so that training is really important for people to have, so that they're able to know how to create a safer environment, how to have that conversation with somebody. It's not a permanent situation. It's during the time that they're struggling with, and how can we do that and keep them safe during that time. So that is one way of making sure that we're safe. But being there with them, getting them connected to resources that are available. If they need inpatient, how to get that to happen. If they need outpatient, how do we get them connected to a provider that's within our area? Just all of those things we talk about in all of our trainings on getting people connected and having a good support system. And I think that is one of the things that the support system is probably really, I mean, it's one of my things that kept me safe during that time because I needed the support of others. And when I started to feel weak, they could tell me, you're going to be okay. We're here. We're with you. And so that was really a helpful part for me during that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so many talking about why we believe this is preventable, because we're not just speaking from a place of optimism. We're speaking from a place of this is a moment in time where someone just wants pain to stop. They just want their situation to change. And just someone being there for them, or knowing that they can reach out to someone, is so important. And we can be that to those people. Now, having said that, there are other things that, and part of the reason why, we start this podcast in our coalition is because there are other things that lead to this, and there are other contributing factors. Let's spend a few moments kind of talking about what's going to come in future episodes, because one of the things that you and I both know are there contributaries to suicidal thoughts. And sometimes there's some things that make things easier: drugs, alcohol. Now, in our area, like so many other pockets around the United States, we have a very serious drug problem. Understanding that there is recovery from that. Part of what we do with our coalition work is educate the public around. We've already done a conference around safe drinking. We're having one coming up in May around the dangers of kratom, something that you can go down to the store right now and go get, and vaping. So helping educate the community around some of these harmful substances, not necessarily tied necessarily to suicide, but things that help numb pain in unhealthy ways. Part of life, as we all know, is pain. We cannot escape pains of life, but some people seem to get an inordinate amount of pain through their traumas. Trauma is also something, when we look at our own area, unfortunately, like one of the communities we serve, per capita is the third highest suicide rate in the entire state of Texas, the second largest state in the entire continental United States, millions and millions and millions and millions of people, and we are the third, with a population of right around 50,000, the whole county. So you're talking about a very high rate. And unfortunately, those numbers have grown and grown over a generation. So the work we're doing here today, we are laying the foundation for others to come into our coalition, and hopefully one day passing the baton, because we understand that this is not going to change tomorrow. This is not going to change next year. We have to have a shift in how the community talks and thinks and acts on suicide.
Absolutely. I know that one of the things that when I do a lot of my outreach at any event that I go to and I'm talking to them, almost every single person I talk to says, I know somebody that died by suicide, or my brother died by suicide, or my father died by suicide, or my granddaughter died by suicide. And it's so amazing to me that there are so many people that have been affected by it. Um, and they're still grieving and they don't know how to get through that grief. And it kind of just hangs on in that area. Um, and one particular lady really, she took me by surprise because she said, I've had 4 people in my life that have died by suicide. And I just thought, that's a lot of people for one family to have to lose in a way that I feel is completely, we're able to stop it. And so that's why it's so important for us to be able to keep talking about it and letting people know that there are resources and there are people that can help you in that process. Even if there has been a suicide, there's a group of us that um, are willing to work with you as a loss survivor. We have our loss survivor team, and we go out to that residence where a suicide has taken place, and we offer help um, to the grieving family. We can we can walk them through that process of what is taking place. We have lots of resources that we can give to them, and we're just there to be able to say, you don't have to go through this by yourself. We have people that are here that can help you. And the majority of those people are people that have experienced a loss by suicide themselves. So they know what that grief feels like. They know the hurt that family is going through. And so being able to say, I made it through this, and we're going to be here to help you through this also. That is something that I've realized that our area definitely needs, because nobody has received help for those suicides that have taken place within our area. And so they're still grieving that loss.
Yeah. And you mentioned resources, and of course, when we go out, when we're dispatched on those calls, we provide the family with resources. But what we have to realize is that, you know, obviously what Michelle and I do, we are resources for the community, but the person in the community themselves, if you have a heart for humanity, if you care about somebody, you are a resource. Again, we don't need new programs. We don't need new things coming down from Austin. We need people in the community to just start understanding the nature of this problem, which is a leading cause of death across the United States. In Texas, it is sometimes number 10, number 11, leading cause of death for all populations. And in our youth, it is very high, leading cause of death for youth. And it sometimes looks as high as 2 and as low as 4. We are losing people who are going through just the struggles of life for whatever reason. They're losing them, and we're losing them here and on an alarming rate. And there's no amount of legislation or hospitals or anything that's going to fix that. What needs to happen is we need to start talking about it first. We need to realize how big this problem is and understand how simple sometimes these interventions can be. Are you okay? Can go a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So our first episode, trying to lay the foundation for why we exist, why we're here. You are a resource. If you're listening to this today, you are a resource. There's a reason why you're listening to this. Now, we are a coalition in East Texas. But if you're listening today, you could be a resource and you could help someone, and we could help you. So be sure to reach out to us at www.spark-cares.com. That's spark-cares.com. On our website, you will find resources. You will find ways to get involved. We need people. We need people because we need resources. We need people to help us with this movement. And of course, we also need programs when it comes to how we can help support people. So we need money. We need donations. We need things that help us turn a donation into a training and a training into saving a life. So, as we begin to wrap things up for this episode, Michelle, what can they look forward to in future episodes?
Well, I know that we have quite a few people that are interested in being on this podcast with us. We are looking at some people that have suicide survivors. Um, and then we're actually looking for some of the people that have lost somebody to suicide, and talking about their story and how they were able to get through that, and the heartache that took place. And then we also have somebody that has had some substance abuse issues. We know that substance abuse and suicidal thoughts kind of go hand in hand, because they like to use the substances to drown out the pain, and then when those substances stop working, the pain is still there. Um, so we know that there's a lot of things that go with that. And so we have some people that are willing to tell their story and be able to talk about that with us, and be able to, kind of walk us through what that looked like for them, and how they were able to get to their recovery part of that and are now giving back to our community. Um, I think it's really important for people to be able to talk about their stories and be able to share that, because there is hope in that. Just like our podcast, Hope, Help, and Healing, all of that is about that there is hope for people, that there is help for people, and the healing process is there, and we're willing to go there with you to get you to the other side of that.
Absolutely. So on this podcast, we're going to have those different topics. We're going to have people that we're going to talk to that have those lived experiences, and we're doing that, as Michelle highlighted, just to help normalize this very normal event and events that people go through in life, but also to help people see that there is healing from that, and there is hope to be found in these stories of survival and just people going through some very, very difficult times in their life and seasons in their life, but nonetheless, they're here. Now, part of our reach is, we try to be uh, a little bit far reaching with everything that we do with our coalition. So you can find us, of course, at our website. You can find us on our YouTube channel. We do have a YouTube channel where we routinely will post videos, messages. You'll find us at Spark Collective. That's our YouTube channel. We also have Spark TV, where we do a little bit longer videos on topics, like we just uploaded a little presentation on people struggling with what's going on in our political environment. We also have an aspect of what we do through music. And I'm really proud that we're doing this, simply because music moves people. And we started Spark Radio. And Spark Radio is something that hopefully brings some understanding, some hope, help, and healing through music. But it also is messaging. We are constantly giving stories of encouragement. And just like what we do with all of our presentations and our channels on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, all the platforms that we're on, 988. Because sometimes in your isolation, you need someone to talk to. You could call or text 988, and someone will help you in your darkest moment. There's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Dial 988 if you or someone you know needs help. Michelle, any final thoughts as we finally wrap up our first episode of the Hope, Help, and Healing podcast?
I guess I just want to say I really appreciate you listening all the way to the end and being able to hear these stories. I hope that we're able to bring encouragement to those, and know that there are services available for you. And we're rooting for you all from where we're at.
Absolutely. And we will have our second episode dropping soon. So thank you again on behalf of Michelle and I for joining Hope, Help, and Healing. Have a good night.
Thank you for spending this time with us on Hope, Help, and Healing. If something in today's conversation stayed with you, take a moment to sit with it. Growth happens in small, steady steps. If you are struggling, please remember that you are not alone. Help is available. You can call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or visit 988lifeline.org. Support is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To learn more about our work or stay connected, visit us at www.spark-cares.com. You can find us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Spotify by searching Spark Cares or Spark Collective. And be sure to find us on Live 365 and listen to Spark Radio. If this podcast encouraged you, consider sharing it with someone who may need it. And until next time, take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and remember, hope is real, help is available, and healing is possible.